Hi, I'm Bill Corcoran Jr., and I'm your host for the On the Stacks podcast.
Today, I'm chatting with Jon Troutman, CEO and co-founder of Empathy Wines.
What's up, podcast, episode 8. Welcome to the now virtual On the Stacks podcast. John, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me today.
So, before we get into your story and the Empathy Wines story with Gary Vee, I got to tell the story, which, you and I connected last week. By the way, for everyone listening right now, I'm kind of sort of, going to maybe throw John under the bus very politely here, but he knows it's going to happen because that's the whole reason we're on this podcast right now, because of the crazy story of how John and I actually just met virtually last week. So the backstory real quick goes like this. About a year or so ago, Empathy Wines launched, and it's a subscription wine box delivered right to your house. So I was interested in getting this wine, and I was on Instagram one day, and all of a sudden I saw John go live on the Empathy Wines page. I forget where it was, but John goes live, and he, immediately, I was like one of the first ones. I just happened to be there like right at that time, and John goes live and he says, "Hey, I'm tasked with getting some new subscribers to this box. It's brand new. Try it out." And I'm like, I've been meaning to pull the trigger on this, and all of a sudden you go live, and I'm watching, and John says, "Hey, anyone that that purchases and subscribes right now while I'm live, I have a special gift for you." So I'm like, I'm gonna do it. So I literally pulled out my credit card right then and there while you're live. You're still talking about the wine, and I subscribed. And John gave out his email over the Instagram live and said, "If you email me your receipt and tell me that you watched my Instagram live video and you subscribed, I'll have something special for you." Right? So I'm like, I'm in. I was gonna subscribe anyway, so this is like perfect, right? So I subscribe. I do everything. I send the email to John, and I copied Gary. I don't know. I got Gary's email somewhere at some point. I copied Gary on the email, sent the receipt, and nothing. Right? Like it just goes like silent. So I gave it some time, and then I got the notification that the wine was shipping. So the wine comes to my house, and I'm like, maybe it's coming in the box. Like maybe it's here, right? So no problem with the wine. Like the wine comes, I get the wine, and I open the box, and there really isn't anything extra other than just the wine. So I'm like, well, whatever. And I kind of just blew it off. But to be honest, like right off the bat, I was slightly disappointed with the whole situation. And I never did anything about it. I never said anything. I never reached out to anyone. I just said, well, screw it, whatever. The wine's good, whatever. I'll drink the wine. So fast forward to just about a week ago, I got a notification that the subscription box auto renewed, and I'm getting another shipment. And I'm like, so a whole year goes by, and I'm like, oh shit. Well, I'm still kind of salty, to be completely honest, right? So I go into my email, and I find this help desk email, and I emailed to this help desk, like saying, "Hey, I want to cancel my subscription." I said, "Not because of the quality of the wine." I said, "That's not why." I said, "It's simply because I had a slight disappointment with the brand itself." And I think I was very polite about it. And I just, said, "Hey, I just want to make you guys aware, because I don't think this is like you guys for this to have happened." And, so I sent that email, and literally, I think, I said, "Hey, I want to cancel the subscription. And by the way, here's my disappointment." So within literally 30 minutes, John replied back to me, and so did Gary Vaynerchuck, which I was highly impressed. And I'm gonna read the email right from John, just to kind of put things in perspective. So John within minutes emails back and says, "Hi, Bill. I'm so sorry on multiple fronts. We of course hate to lose you as an Empathy Club member, but more importantly, we hate that you had a bad impression of Empathy Wines. It's not what we stand for. For whatever reason, I missed your emails following my live stream offer. No excuses. I dropped the ball. If you know anything about Gary and the businesses we build, this is the last thing we'd want to happen. Customers like you are the lifeblood of our business, especially in the earliest stages. We're beyond grateful. If there's anything we can do to help make things right, please let me know. We're happy to cancel your membership. That said, I'd love the opportunity to jump on the phone if you're available and up for it. Hearing from our customers is one of our favorite things and helps make us better. Hope to talk to you soon. Thank you. So also within a minute after that, Gary Vee responds, I never thought I'd see the light of the day that I would ever have any correspondence with Gary. And I was highly impressed. And Gary responds, John, ? This is literally the first negative comment or feedback I've seen. Please get me info ASAP and allow me to help here. Bill, once I understand what happened, I will have John or I reach out and apologize in person. And I want to personally come up with something to make this feeling a little less yucky. So at that point, I replied back to John. I said, hey, John, I appreciate the response and, acknowledging you dropped the ball. And I said, I'm going to take you up on the phone call. I said, I want to take things one step further. I said, I just launched this podcast called On the Stacks. I said, how about we jump on this podcast and tell the story of how you turned a negative into a positive. And now here we are.
I hate to relive that story. And at the same token, thank you so much for giving us the second chance. I think, anybody in kind of a similar scenario, whether it's a small business owner or operator or whatever it is, and kind of hears a story like that played back, they just start to grimace. You never want to disappoint anybody, any customer. You really don't want to do it when it's something that's, directly tied to something that you were doing, like I was with that live stream you described. And, I can only hope that if there's anything that comes out of this, it's how to take a negative situation and hopefully turn it into a positive. And I think, we've already done that. It kind of gave me a chance to build the one-on-one connection with you, Bill, even if it didn't come under the greatest of circumstances, but kind of fast forward to where we are now. And, it's been a great opportunity to get to know you a little bit, hear a little bit about your business, kind of share war stories on both sides about how negatives can be turned into positives. And I just thank you for giving us the second chance here today and giving us a chance to have us on the podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thank you for, like I said, responding as fast as you did. And, same thing with Gary. And like I said, I was highly, highly impressed that, both of you responded. And, I wanted to ask you too. So, I know Gary takes pride in responding to people, but I guess, and not that I didn't think he would ever, not respond. It's just, I didn't think it would happen to me, so kind of what happened on the side? I mean, was there anything that happened on the side, between you and Gary, while this happened? I mean, he responded so fast, and I'm like so impressed by that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think for Gary, and as many hands as he has in different pots and different fires, he manages to stay really, really close to community of people and all the different customers across his different lines of business, whether that's his agency businesses or his wine businesses or just in kind of his day-to-day Gary Vee life. And so for him, it was in that moment seeing an email and realizing that it needed a quick reply. And so, this isn't something out of the extraordinary for him. It's, of course, he likes to keep those, negative emails into the inbox as low as possible. But when they do happen, from time to time, he'll chime in there. And so for he and I, we work really closely together. And kind of in this case, we wanted to take the opportunity to make sure we did whatever it took to make it right. So.
Yeah, that's great. So just to kind of also put things a little bit in perspective I feel like a lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast right now, a lot of people I feel like will know who Gary Vee is, but then there's also going to be some people who don't know who Gary Vee is. So can you just in 1 or 2 minutes or less just kind of give the overview and paint the picture of who he is, and then we're going to go into how you met him.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gary's a well-known entrepreneur who has built a series of different businesses, pretty much all on the backs of one thing, and that's kind of knowing where consumer attention is today and where it's quickly shifting. And so what that meant years and years ago was when he was starting working in his family's wine business, the Wine Library in New Jersey. It was recognizing that people were quickly gravitating towards the internet, and that's talking in the kind of mid '90s, late '90s. And so ultimately that meant launching an e-commerce wine business for this family's wine store, being very, very early days to the Google AdWords trend, and really taking advantage of and exploiting these early internet tools in their infancy before anybody else does. And so fast forward many years later, he went on to kind of move away from the wine industry, launch a very successful advertising industry, or excuse me, very successful ad agency called VaynerMedia, as well as building his personal brand, which is probably what he's best known for, is really being kind of a social media personality for all the different channels that he markets on across Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. All the success he's had in kind of the large ad world and social media world, never really lost a love for the wine industry. And so as of 2 years ago, we set out to start Empathy Wines, which is a business that I now am and his partner in, along with a third partner of ours, Nate Scherotter. And so the business is very new. So we officially announced it just a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago. And we make wines in California.
So how did you and Gary actually meet? Like what year was it? Where'd you guys meet? How did you guys, link up?
Yeah. So the Cliff Notes version of the story was shortly after I finished college, was during the last recession. So needless to say, having graduated with a business degree, it wasn't the best time to be entering a job market. I decided I wanted to follow kind of my two passions in life, one of which was wine, kind of a budding interest that turned into a real passion, as well as business. So with a big focus on marketing, I was just always kind of fascinated with consumer behavior and really where that was going and kind of the advent of technologies like Facebook and Twitter. And so as I was kind of studying those two areas and those two passion points in my life, I was at a crossroads. I knew I didn't want to invest all that money to go get my MBA. I didn't really know how to cut my teeth in the wine industry in the best way possible without going up either the sommelier track and working in restaurants for long hours. I was fortunate enough to come across this crazy guy on the internet screaming about wine and giving crazy wine reviews every day, which I later learned was Wine Library TV. It was this really smart episodic TV series that Gary had started. And so, sparing you all the details, I was offered an opportunity to move to New York and work for Gary for free. And so at the time, I spent every penny that I had in order to make that move and figure out a way to make it work. With the idea being that it would be either a great resume builder and a great experience at the very least. But ultimately what it turned into is kind of a lifelong friendship and a lifelong mentor in Gary. And so been able to learn under him in both of those areas, both wine, marketing, and business. So it ultimately paid off, but definitely a big risk that I took years ago. Thankfully, both of us invested in one another and kind of led to where we are today.
That's great. So you worked a little bit with him. What different roles did you have within the company? I know you worked at VaynerMedia at some point. What were some different roles? What did you do?
Yeah, so the first couple of years were spent working with him in the wine industry. That was when his kind of core day-to-day was still in wine. And so started a company called Corked, which was a wine social network. And so that was in the early days of kind of the budding social networks of Twitter and Facebook. And we wanted to create the niche version of those. The company was really successful, but ultimately it was at the same time that he was starting to transition away from wine. And so I recognized that to continue working with him and kind of to get visibility into more businesses and different categories outside of just the wine world, it would be a smart move to kind of transition over with him. And so I moved over to VaynerMedia, which is really a modern day ad agency or communications agency. So I spent about 7 years with that company wearing a lot of different hats. I think I was in the first handful of employees in the door. It's now a company of about 900 people with offices internationally. So just an unbelievable experience to kind of be a part of that kind of growth and to experience that kind of explosive expansion. But ultimately I ended up playing a kind of a chief of staff role to Gary, which was really gave me visibility and kind of access to just about every area of the business.
That's really cool. And
Yeah.
at this point, it sounds like that unpaid internship really paid off.
It did. And it's something, at a high level, I would encourage a lot of people to consider. It's not the sexiest thing to do to go and work for somebody for free. And in many ways, I think a lot of people view it as maybe downright wrong, depending on the circumstances. But I think if you're working for the right person and under the right pretense, it can lead to great things. And I think in a world where so many people are putting themselves into severe debt going back to graduate school or whatever it might be, and it's not to say that those paths and those decisions are the wrong decision for everybody. Of course, it makes sense for different careers and different opportunities. But for me, I kind of followed an unnatural path, and it definitely worked out for the better for everybody.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you're definitely living proof of that. So let's get back into why we're really here and talk about Empathy Wines a little bit. How did Empathy Wines get started?
Great question. A big part of it stemmed from kind of the passion I mentioned that myself, Gary, and Nate all had for the wine world. So just at a personal level, wanting to get back into that industry. But above and beyond that, it was just a recognition that the industry was inherently flawed in a couple of ways. I think on one side of the equation, you had some amazing people making great wines around the world. And there's no doubt that there's, an incredible range of different wines being made at all sorts of different price points in the US and abroad. I think the problem that in the business model that the vast majority of those wines follow is that in order before it gets into your glass, it touches a lot of different hands in between. So a bottle of wine, if it's being imported, first comes over from an importer. The importer then sells that wine to a distributor. A distributor then sells that wine to a retailer, and then a retailer finally sells it to you. And so you don't have to, have an MBA or graduate degree to realize that all those hands along the way mean a lot of markups. And so for us, we recognized that wasn't good for the end consumer. That meant that they were incurring a cost that they shouldn't have to. And then on the flip side, though, you did see a handful of different businesses that had, emerged and grown a ton in the wine club world. Whether that's, the XYZ newspaper offering a customized wine program, or all these different startup e-commerce businesses that were wine clubs. I will say, not to knock them, but the vast majority of those companies are selling schwill. So really not good wine. They're private labels or white labels wines where all of the investment and all of the expense is spent on the marketing side in order to acquire customers, and the product itself is not very good. And so really what we said was, how do we create the hybrid version of those two things? So sell direct to consumer, only sell through that kind of wine club model in order to eliminate all of those different layers in between of cost. But then at the same time, make really good wines and do it in an honest way and do it in an authentic way where we are really hands-on in the winemaking process. We have a close relationship with all of the actual farmers who are growing our grapes. We're extremely hands-on in the decision-making of how those grapes are farmed, when they're harvested, what kind of barrels we use, what toast levels we use for the barrels, and then right down to the actual final blend. And so long-winded way of saying we started a winery in California with just a totally different way of selling the wine itself in order to save you money.
So you kind of just touched on a little bit, but so where's the wine made? So there's three different kinds of wine, right?
That's right. Yeah. In the early days of getting started, we wanted to keep it really simple. So we make three wines. We make them all in Napa Valley. All of the grapes are grown in Northern California, so in the surrounding area of Lodi, Mendocino, Lake County. We make a rosé, a white wine, and a red blend, all of which are sold seasonally. So it's spring right now. We just released our rosé this week.
I just got it.
Yep. Awesome.
My wife, we did. And, it's funny. My wife's drinking it right now. So I got home from work and We popped it open. I had it, but I also, one other thing I have to tell you, like, so I'm drinking the red right now.
Mhm.
Um, and for some reason now, what the red, I know this specifically, the red came in like September, I think, and or somewhere around there. And the only reason I know that is because we just moved into our new house in September. And the reason I remember this is because the wine was getting shipped to my old house. And I'm like, oh shit. So I remember emailing someone and saying, hey, could you change the address? I moved. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. So that red wine, it's 3 bottles. And for some reason, I saved one bottle of it, and we had it on the counter from September up until now. And I don't know why we never drank it or we never opened it. I was saving it for some weird reason. And I think I was saving it for today because we literally, I opened it today,
Feels like the right time.
right?
I appreciate you opening the bottle and sharing it with me
Yeah. Uh,
virtually.
yes. Yeah. So out of the wines, which one's your favorite? I mean, what are you a red, a white?
It's like picking a favorite child. No, for for me right now, I've actually been drinking a ton of the white wine. And for whatever reason, I think it's probably the reason I like it so much. It's so food friendly, where it's a blend of primarily 3 grapes, so the Chenin Blanc, Viognier, and Chardonnay, and each kind of contribute its own unique character. But the Chenin Blanc gives it really bright, crisp, kind of high acid notes, and then Chardonnay and Viognier lend a little bit of weight and kind of body to it. But that's the wine that I just keep going to, where it can take me everywhere from cocktail hour right through the night, having dinner, and even have a nightcap. So it's the bottle I open the most of for sure.
Nice. I'm a red guy myself. Not that I don't like the white, but I prefer red. So question, is is there anything different about the wine this year from last year?
So the wines are definitely going to have different characteristics this year. So the vintage was a little bit different. So 2019 and 2018, stylistically, just slightly different. That said, we're working with all the same growers and all the same farmers that we did in year one, and sourcing same grapes, a lot of which come from literally the exact same plot of land right in the same vineyard. So because of that, you're definitely going to see, lots of similarities, and stylistically it's going to be pretty darn similar. I think you will see just a little bit of vintage variation, and if anything, I think just in year two we kind of have our feet underneath us now, and made some tweaks to the final blends, and really were able to dial in where we wanted to go with the wine. So I think if anything, you'll see a little bit of an improvement in the 2019 vintage wines.
Good. So
Yeah.
so how do you guys market yourselves? What do you do?
Whew.
I
Big
know.
question.
Yeah, it is big stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, as unsurprisingly as an e-commerce company, marketing in this day and age, we are primarily using digital marketing, and really the places where we see the majority of consumer attention going. And so that's kind of the tried and true places like Google, Facebook network, including Instagram. But I will say we're super excited to experiment with new channels too. Given that we're an alcohol brand, there are some limitations and different regulatory things. So, for instance, you won't see us on TikTok,
Okay.
and that's because it does cater to a younger audience. So, one, might not necessarily make sense for us to be there in the earliest days, but two, there's some regulatory things that kind of restrict us from going certain places. But really, where we're seeing lots of success is kind of in those tried and true digital networks and digital platforms, and using those ad technologies to kind of tell our story. But most importantly, it's probably in the actual videos and pictures and creative itself, in order to tell that story of what makes us so different, and being able to shine a light on some of those farmers that I mentioned we work with.
So right now in the midst of COVID-19, I mean, have you guys, been affected by this? I mean, are you guys doing anything different?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, and goes without saying, what's been an absolutely awful, awful situation the world. If there is a silver lining for us as a business, it's that now more than ever, people are considering buying their wine online. Either their wine stores aren't open, or it's much more difficult or advised against in order to go there. So for us, what that's meant is people are, considering joining Empathy Wines, and they're giving us a try for the first time. I think for us, what's been, now that we're about a full month into it, I think we saw that growth and the kind of that consumer behavior shifting, and within the first few days of kind of the big COVID outbreak. Probably what's been most gratifying about it is we're seeing people come back already, and so people who maybe had been hesitant to try us, but finally committed to ordering a few bottles, ultimately went on to order maybe a second case or a third case already just a few weeks in. So, like I said, terrible situation, but from our business specifically, it's definitely opened up the gates for people to try buying wine online.
So if you can give any advice at all for somebody, maybe just starting out in business, doesn't have to be the wine business or anything like that.
Yeah.
Just in general, what would you say?
Oh man, I think the one thing I've realized through both my own actions as well as just hearing from different people who run different businesses across different categories, it's just go out and try things. Chances are your business plan on day one isn't going to be perfect. Nobody's is, and any successful entrepreneur who looks back on it is definitely remembering a different story than what actually happened. I think just go try things. I think you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail at different stages along the way. I think the key is trust your gut. Obviously, act with lots of sound strategy. Anybody who do your homework and definitely know what you're doing going into it. But don't be afraid to do things. I think too often people are kind of crippled with trying to be perfect right from the get-go, when sometimes the best way to start is to just dive in head first and try things.
Yeah, that works. Kind of shifting gears a little bit here. Have you ever been to NEPA, and that's Northeastern PA, and we call it NEPA. Have you ever been to Pennsylvania here in NEPA?
I have, yeah. I've had some old family friends who were from the Northern PA area. My fiance is from Philadelphia, so definitely find myself in PA in general, and have definitely touched different parts of the state.
Well, if you're ever in the Wilkes-Barre Scranton area, you always have an open invitation. You'll have to come by. We can actually maybe eventually get a real photo of you and I on the stack. So if you're ever in the area, you always have an open invitation.
I'm going to take you up on that. I can't wait. It's a good excuse to finally get together once this quarantine is lifted.
For sure. So where are you at right now?
So at the moment I'm in Massachusetts, staying in a family's house here. Luckily was able to get out of New York City, where really the eye of the storm is right now.
That's good.
Yeah.
So back to Empathy Wines. How can someone subscribe, buy? What do they need to do?
There's only one place to buy. That's empathywines.com. Wines plural. Hope anybody can go visit there, learn a little bit more about the wines, learn a little bit about our story and kind of why we think we're doing something really different in the wine world, why we think it'll ultimately lead to a better bottle for your money.
Absolutely. So, besides the website, where else can people learn more? Social media?
That's right. Empathy Wines across just about every handle. So at Empathy Wines on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Those are the primary channels. You can look up some of our YouTube and LinkedIn content that we're posting from time to time. Empathy Wines. It's pretty easy, and we were able to secure the handles across just about every platform.
That's great. So I know I told you I wouldn't throw you any curveballs, but this is a real easy one, I promise. Well, kind of. So how do I get Gary on the podcast?
Great question. Gary's time these days is very sacred, and he's busier than ever. But in general, you know what? It's funny. People ask that question from time to time. The best way is to just hit him up on all his channels. Email is obviously the place where he you'll probably get more of his team, so his assistants will end up being able to help. But Twitter, Instagram, and you just got to catch his attention at the right moment.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happened. Going back to the beginning of the podcast here, when I told the story of the email chain and how he responded, and you and I spoke offline, right after that happened, and before we connected about getting on the podcast. But I remember you told me, like, I hit him at the right moment and the right type of email, a disappointment email, and he responded.
Yep. And I'll do my part to get him on the stacks. I'll try to grease the wheels. We'll see what we can do.
All right, yeah, maybe shoot him a text after, tell him how awesome it was, and hopefully we'll have him on in a few months. So I think we're getting ready to wrap it up here. So is there anything else that you want people to know about Empathy Wines? This whole story of why we're on the podcast. I think everyone has something to learn from this story and this podcast and what happened between you and I. And thank you again for going way above and beyond and Gary to making this whole thing right. So thank you. And if there's anything else you want to add before we wrap it up.
No, I'll just say thank you for the opportunity. Been a ton of fun. Love kind of sharing the story of Empathy Wines, and more importantly, getting to know one of our top customers. But really, thanks for the opportunity for us to make it better. I think, of course, we always want to get better and don't want to drop balls, but I hope to, I imagine a lot of entrepreneurs and business people listen to this podcast. And so hopefully there's something they can take away from it too.
Oh, I'm sure everyone listening at least got some good value of information from it.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing a glass with me and having me on.
Absolutely. Jon Troutman, CEO and co-founder of Empathy Wines. Thank you again for joining me on the now virtual On the Stacks podcast.
If you'd like to learn more about the On the Stacks podcast, be sure to search the hashtag On the Stacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll catch you next time on the Stacks.